really wanted to follow up on a bit more on this $1 million day. Because, I mean, it really changed your industry. It was the 4-minute mile. Nobody thought it was possible. And I think there's a lot of people at home that, they want to change their life. They have a vision of what they want to make happen. And they believe it, sort of, but they never follow through. And so I'd love to kind of get a sense of how did you get to the point where, you make $1 million in, was it less than 24 hours?
Yeah, it was like 18 hours.
In 18 hours, you make $1 million. I mean, it's beyond most people's imagination.
Yeah, and I think up until that point, the industry, the kind of record or whatever, the big thing that was thought of was like $100,000 in a 24-hour period.
Wow.
So
you took it 10x.
Yeah, so it was August 17th, 2004. I'll never forget that date. One, because when I lived in Orlando at the time, there was a Hurricane Charlie, that just annihilated Central Florida, cut out all my power, and I actually had to break my garage door to get my car out. Me and a friend drove from my place a couple hours north to where my parents lived to actually manage the launch day of that project that was happening like the next day. And it's pretty interesting. It's almost like divine intervention, because looking back on it, no one knew for sure how great that day was going to turn out. Right. I, of course, believe big, and we can talk about that a little bit.
Right.
But we can walk a little bit.
Sure.
The neat thing for me was, and just reflecting on when that happened with the hurricane and everything else, was that I ended up getting to share that major day and accomplishment with my family, who was always very, very supportive of me, even when I was in over $100,000 of debt by the time I was 23 years old.
Right. They trying to do this very thing, failing at it, right?
Yeah, they had given me a little bit of money, and even when I was in a lot of debt, they gave me a little bit more money. Not a lot, but just trying to help me until they could no longer help me anymore, and I had to figure things out on my own just because they weren't in that position. But so anyways, just mentioning that, it was great to be able to share that accomplishment and have them be a part of it. My dad actually managed a little whiteboard that showed how many sales, before before the whole sale started. I said, this is the goal for us. We're going for $1 million in the launch day for 24 hours, because it's never been done anything like it. And so we wrote on the board exactly how many sales were needed to reach the goal.
So you broke it down.
Yeah, and every hour I'd report to my dad, and he'd ask for the update, and he was so proud managing the whiteboard, changing the number of how many more were to go.
Right.
And it was just an exciting day all the way around. But
and none of that would happen if you hadn't had the hurricane coming in. You would have been by yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe it never would have happened because of just, the circumstances.
That's very cool.
But yeah, it's interesting that $1 million day really changed a lot of people's mindsets. People have compared it to like the 4-minute mile.
Right.
Roger Bannister and you were telling me off camera how many people broke the 4-minute mile once he did it.
Well, somebody said 37. The real number is 24. 24 people within a year for thousands of years. This wasn't something that happened for 100 years. In the Roman times, they're trying to do a 4-minute mile. It was thought the human body couldn't physically go that fast. They would even put a guy with a rope with a bull behind him to give him extra incentive so he wouldn't get gored, and it would happen. But Roger Bannister ran that 4-minute mile by rehearsing it in his head. He could never get his body to move that fast, so in his mind he saw it over and over and over again until he got this little sense of certainty and kicked it over the edge. But the kicker is, just like you in your industry, once that happened, 24 people run a 4-minute mile within a few years, and now high school students run 4-minute miles.
Right.
It's unbelievable.
And now here, filming this in 2009, 5 years later, a little less than 5 years, not only is that, $1 million day been done by multiple people, I've actually done it several times myself now again, but other people have gone way beyond that. Frank has been involved with a massive day, many times that.
Yeah.
But it was like a huge mindset shift in people to make that happen.
So let's talk about that, because everybody has mindset. People watching say, okay, it's really, they're going to go wonderful. You had $1 million day. Jerk, I've never even had a $10,000 day, right?
Absolutely.
So what I wanted to get across, though, is you knew exactly what you're going after. You had absolute certainty you're going to find a way to make it happen. Right. You envisioned it.
A week before, and anyone can look this up online, a week before the launch day, I registered the internet domain name milliondollarday.com.
Wow.
And it's a fact. It is registered. People can go and look it up right now about what the date was when it was registered, and it would have been like August 10th because the launch was a week later on the 17th.
So this is what we've been talking about, right?
Yeah.
You had this vision, you made it so clear and real in your mind, so certain, and then you found a way to execute, and you had some grace, right? There's a little bit of luck and a little grace involved. So it's like, what do? You have to have three things. You have to have this absolute obsession on what you want, even if it's never done before. You got to get yourself so certain. You got to secondly execute, because you still have to execute.
Right.
And then you have to have some grace, and those three things work. But I want to get across something else. Before you had $1 million day,
right,
what was like a giant peak for you? Didn't you have like $100,000?
Yeah, well, about 3 months before that.
Come sit down by the fire.
Sure, sure.
We'll sit down. I want to hear this.
So about 3 months before that,
Right.
A mutual friend of ours, Jeff Walker.
Right, I know Jeff.
Who, Jeff, it's kind of a funny story because Jeff was known, Jeff orchestrates product launches. He's had a lot of experience with it, more than anyone else in our industry.
Right.
And at the time, back then, Jeff was known, he was called 6 and 7. That was his little code name because he made 6 figures in 7 days.
Right.
And so I was getting ready to do a seminar, my own event. And up until this point, it's been the only one I ever did. Frank actually got me to do it.
Right.
And I never sold anything to the internet marketing market. He said, you really should just do an event. People would love to hear just you teach for a weekend. I'm like, okay, I'll do it.
Right.
So before releasing it for sale, I was talking to Jeff on the phone. We'd become friends at that time. And Jeff was sharing some principles with me on building anticipation in marketing. Not just coming out with something for sale, building up to it. It's just like the music industry. When they release an album, they let you know months in advance, or a movie comes out.
Sure.
So Jeff taught me some principles about building anticipation, and so I put that into my marketing with everything else that I had kind of figured out from my own experience.
Right.
I released the seminar, and I ended up doing it was like $100,000 that was made in the first day, but it really all came in like the first 12 minutes before I took the site down.
Wow.
It wasn't going to do much more than that if I would have left it up. But so I teased Jeff. I was like, you did the 100,000 in 7 days. I did it in 12 minutes. And so, all of us are we're real good friends. It's competitive. We support each other. And, I was thrilled when Frank broke my record after I did $1 million day. And, and so we're very supportive of each other and of anyone in the industry because it doesn't take anything away from me. It's good for them. So that happened. So I had that milestone of $100,000.
And part of what drove you in each of these cases was one to set the standard higher. That's what all of you guys are doing. You
like
love
stairs.
each other.
You go higher and higher steps.
So do me a favor, because a lot of people go, okay, you blew me away with $1 million in less than 24 hours, 100,000 in 12 minutes.
Right.
But before you ever got there were lower stairs.
Sure.
Bring me down, because you didn't go straight to the middle.
Absolutely not.
You could do it today because you've demonstrated it, right?
Absolutely.
It's like the 4-minute mile.
Absolutely.
But where did it start even earlier for you? Before you got to the 100,000,
Sure.
What was the biggest day before that?
It was like 22,000.
Okay.
And and it was and that had done about 40,000 in a week.
Right.
And why I remember this so much is because the goal for me always, which we've kind of talked about a little bit before, just talking today. For me, my goal early on was just 40,000 a year, because I knew that number. I wanted, of course, billions one day.
Right.
But I knew with that number, I wouldn't have to have a real job. Right. So 40,000 for me was the number to be able to do my own thing.
Right.
And so when I did that 2 or 3 years earlier than that in a week. And for me, that was just mind-boggling, But it was about a $20,000 day if we're comparing it to days.
Right.
And then before that, it was probably about $4,500. And I remember that specifically.
You were telling me when we first talked.
Yeah.
That was the one you were telling me about.
Well, that's the one that probably meant the most to me.
Why? Now, by the way, if somebody watching, you hear these $1 million numbers, and it's like some of you are like, I'm going to do that. Others are like, I don't need $1 million, or I don't believe that's possible. But $4,500 in a day is what a lot of people would love to be able to make in a month.
Of course,
right?
Of course.
Why did that one mean so much to you?
I think because that was the most that ever came in, at one time above maybe $400 or $500.
Right.
It just all came in at once in one small period of time, and I was like, wow, I could really see the potential of doing something in a short period of time.
Right.
So
you've literally lived that model that we teach, we talked about previously, which is the potential's there for anybody. You got to get yourself to take action, and the right actions, and you'll get the result. But the problem is most people don't believe to start with, and you just built that belief by getting your first $400 day, and then turning eventually a $4,500 day, and then a $20,000 day, and then a $100,000 12 minutes, and then one day you're doing $1 million and breaking the records in the world, and now you do many of these $1 million days, right? So what would you say?
And that's why I talk about that make a dollar first thing that I told you about.
Yeah, tell me more.
So when I, teach students and try to get people that have never made any money for themselves, or even if they're already doing something, and I get them to kind of start over to go in a new direction, well, backing up for a second. So, the first thing I ask people is like, well, how much money do you want to make?
Right.
And the wrong answer that I get from people is, well, as much as possible.
Yeah,
as much as possible doesn't exist.
That's right.
And I know you're big into specifics and getting people to think specifics, and so am I, because you can reverse engineer any number. If you want to make $10 million a week, there's a plan for that.
That's right.
But I tell everybody, but you have to start with making $1 first. There's almost been no one in the history of mankind that's made $1 million, whether it's in a day, an hour, or 10 years, before they made $1.
Without a doubt.
So it starts with that smallest level of incremental progress.
That's why they always say the second million's always easier to make.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the first million is the learning process.
Exactly.
And you take that million concept and you bring it down to the $1, and that's achievable. So one of the things I think the messages for people watching, what's holding them back is thinking they have to do 100,000 in a minute or 1 million or 10,000 or some big number. What they really have to do is just first show themselves that they can make some money.
Actually,
and then
to validate to the brain that, hey, this works.
That's
what
right.
I'm doing.
That's right. And once they get that certainty.
Yeah, because if someone can put in the work to make $1 at any process, they're 90% of the way to making $100,000 with the same process.
Right.
You just do more of the same thing.
And you leverage it. And technology allows you to leverage it without anywhere near the amount of energy.
Easily.
And that's the difference between having a job and having a freedom, the life that has total freedom in it.
And that's why also, you're talking about like your second million's easier than your first million. It's the same belief concept in all this. Why people that build fortunes and something happens and they lose everything.
Yeah.
Can start over so quickly and get it all back. Like, I believe that about myself. If you took away everything that I have today, I would probably be back where I am and probably beyond it in a few months.
Yeah. Because you've made the shifts inside yourself that made it possible in the first place, and you can do it both. There's a gentleman, I'm blanking his name, I think he was the big advertising guy. I apologize, I can't think of his name. True story. He built a fortune of about $500 million, got it to $750 million, and then he cashed out and he bought I think it was the Stop and Go franchise, like 7-Eleven, and in 3 or 4 years lost it all, almost $1 billion. And he was 62, 63 years old. In 4 years, he made $1 billion. He got the stuff back. He got everything it took him, 60 years plus to be able to earn, and then some in 4 years, because inside of him, and I think that's the beauty of this, you have to shift what's going on in you to shift what's going on in your world. If you make those shifts inside of yourself and you learn how to do that, there's no limit to what you can achieve or what you can create in your life. And you're proof of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it starts with the smallest amount of progress. Any progress at all is worth gold compared to no progress. And people don't realize that. Most people, when I say, let's focus on making that first $1, most people's natural reaction is, like, oh, $1, what's that going to do for me?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you have no idea the power of what it will do inside your head and what it will do for you if you just make that $1. Because you're just so much closer to the $100,000 that you want to make in a year or a month or whatever it is than you are without that. And so it starts with that, and then obviously the beliefs they exponentially compound to greater and greater beliefs. And so that's exactly what happened with me, where we started this conversation, with the $1 million day and where that all began. For me, it was a progression. I wish it would have happened faster in my life. I wish I would have had you telling me, I wish I would have known more about how you structure belief systems and how you can get it inside your head to take it to a higher level. I didn't need to go through all those years before I would finally believe it myself. And so that's the challenge for people, is you can believe that. You can believe the $1 million day today, which many people ended up doing after I accomplished that. That's why it happened for others. Same thing with the 4-minute mile. All those other runners were like, well, he did it. And then, bam, 20-something people went and did it right away, and who knows how many since then.
Well, high school students are doing it now,
literally.
Literally.
Exactly. So
I think, I want to thank you for sharing this, because it reminds people that if somebody has already, taken the path and made it possible, it's not something that's never been done. Your ability to get there can happen so much more rapidly, but you got to start with the first increment and not be embarrassed by that or think like it doesn't matter. I always tell people, one thing equals happiness: progress.
Right.
If you're not where you want to be financially, you're not where you want to be physically or in a relationship, make some progress. Even if you haven't lost the weight yet, but you start walking, you start jogging just a little bit. After 4 or 5 days, you're going to feel good. And the same thing's true financially. Get yourself on a program and start making progress. Even if you're not there yet, you're making a few $1,000s, a few $100s. It'll give you momentum, and momentum is how you go from $400 a day, $4,500 a day to $1 million plus in a day, and anyone can make it happen. That's the message.
And you just touched on the key, I believe, as well. The momentum is the most powerful force in all in building wealth.
Yeah.
It's just like literally like that snowball going downhill.
But you got to get that first tip over the edge, right?
And that's for most people the hardest thing, or the thing that never happens, unfortunately, for most people. They don't get the pebble rolling down the hill.
Yeah.
Because they're just thinking of the big boulder, and that's what they want in their lives is the big boulder already churning.
Yeah.
But they don't realize that if they just give the little flick to the pebble to get it started, that it's almost like everything else mentally takes care of itself.
True.
It just compounds and compounds. So, hopefully people watching this, that's what they take away from this, is that the millions or the hundreds of thousands or whatever it is that they desire financially in their lives is only going to come to them by starting with that smallest amount first and then just letting it accelerate. It doesn't mean if you start with a small amount that it has to take years and years and years for it to reach 100,000 a year or whatever else. But I think the main point here is that you must start. There is no other way around it to get what you want except to start with the smallest increment, which I believe is just $1, and getting the process going and then just letting it grow and multiply.
That's perfect. Thank you. I think it's going to make a difference for a lot of people.
Sure thing.
Really
sure
awesome.
thing. Good talking to you.